Have you ever had that feeling deep in your gut that the world isn't quite what it seems? That if you just turned your head fast enough, you might catch reality glitching just for a second? Most people dismiss it. They call it déjà vu, an overactive imagination, a trick of the light. But you and I, we know better, don't we? We've felt the cold spot in a warm room. We've heard the whisper on a windless night. We've seen the shadow that had no business being there. What you're about to hear are not just stories. They are echoes from those moments when the veil thinned, when something from the other side, or from somewhere else entirely, decided to reach out and touch our world. So, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and listen closely. Because after this, you might start paying a little more attention to those glitches in the Matrix. You might have to. It was the summer of 2006, and I was working as a fire lookout in a remote tower in the Montana wilderness. My only company was a crackling radio and miles upon miles of silent, watchful trees. For weeks, the job was exactly what you'd expect. Monotonous, peaceful, beautiful. I'd watch the sun rise and set, track the slow crawl of cloud shadows, and report the occasional wisp of smoke. Then came the silent storm. It was a Tuesday night, clear as a bell, with a billion stars blazing overhead. Around 2 in the morning, I saw a flash in the distance to the west. I grabbed my binoculars, expecting to see the telltale glow of a lightning strike on the horizon. But there was no thunder, not even a distant rumble. Then it flashed again, but this time it wasn't a jagged bolt. It was a perfect sheet of cold, blue-white light that illuminated the entire mountain range for a split second. Still silence. Over the next hour, this continued. Geometric flashes. Sometimes it was a perfect square of light, sometimes a triangle, sometimes a series of concentric circles that pulsed outwards like ripples in a pond. My radio was dead silent. I tried calling it in, but all I got was static. A profound, deep-seated sense of being watched washed over me. It wasn't like a cougar in the dark. It was an intelligent, analytical feeling, like I was a bug in a jar. The final flash was directly above my tower. A sheet of light descended, and for a moment, the entire world outside my glass windows was pure, blinding white. The metal frame of the tower hummed, vibrating through the soles of my boots. And in that hum, I heard something, not with my ears, but inside my head. It was a sound like a billion whispering voices, all speaking a language I couldn't understand. Yet I just knew, it was a question. Then as suddenly as it began, it was over. The sky was just stars again. The radio crackled back to life. I never reported it. Who would have believed me? But I never went back. Sometimes when a storm rolls in, I can still feel that hum in my bones and hear the echo of that impossible question. 3 years ago, I was a freshman in college, living in a cramped dorm room with my best friend, Liam. We were inseparable, had all the same classes, the same stupid sense of humor. Our room was our sanctuary, a mess of textbooks, video game consoles, and pizza boxes. One evening, I was hunkered down at my desk, cramming for a midterm. Liam had gone to the library a couple of hours earlier. It was around 10 p.m. when I heard the keycard beep and the heavy door to our room swing open. I didn't look up, just said, "Hey man, find what you needed?" I heard him grunt in response, the sound of his backpack hitting the floor, the rustle of his jacket being thrown onto his bed. The usual sounds. I mumbled something about the professor being a sadist and kept my eyes glued to my notes. I heard the creak of his desk chair, the soft click of his computer mouse. It was also normal. About 15 minutes went by in comfortable silence. Then my phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from Liam. It read, "Dude, library is packed. Heading back now, you want anything from the vending machine?" I froze, my blood turned to ice water. I could still hear the faint, rhythmic clicking of the mouse from his side of the room. Every muscle in my body screamed at me not to, but I slowly, deliberately turned my head. His chair was empty. His computer was off. His backpack and jacket were gone. The room was still and silent. I whipped my head back to the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was closed and locked, just as it had been. I texted Liam back, my fingers trembling. "Where are you right now?" His reply came instantly. "Literally just walking up to the dorm building." Why? I never told him what happened. How could I explain that I had sat there for 15 minutes with a perfect copy of him, a silent phantom roommate who vanished the second the real one announced his return? I slept with the lights on for a month. My grandfather passed away when I was 10. He was a quiet man, a carpenter, and he always smelled of sawdust and pipe tobacco. A few weeks after the funeral, I was in his old workshop in the basement, a place my grandmother now kept locked. I'd found the key and snuck in, wanting to feel close to him again. The air was thick with that familiar smell. I was running my hand over the smooth, worn wood of his workbench when I heard a floorboard creak upstairs. I figured it was my grandma and froze, waiting to be yelled at. But then I heard a second sound. It was the distinct rhythmic squeak of the old rocking chair he always sat in the living room. Squeak, pause, squeak, pause. The same slow, steady rhythm he'd had for years. My heart started to race. Then I heard a low, gentle humming. It was the tune he always hummed when he was concentrating, a little folk song I never knew the name of. I was terrified, but also not. I crept up the basement stairs and peeked through the crack in the door. The living room was empty. The rocking chair was perfectly still. The house was silent. But as I stood there, a faint, lingering scent drifted down the stairs and filled my nostrils. Not sawdust this time, just the sweet, comforting smell of his pipe tobacco. It felt like he was just letting me know he was still around. I never went into the workshop again, but sometimes, when I'm alone in that house, I can still smell it. A ghostly, gentle reminder. I'm a long-haul trucker. I've driven every back road and forgotten highway in this country, and I've seen some strange things. But nothing compares to what I saw on a desolate stretch of road in Nevada, somewhere between nowhere and nothing. The locals call it the Alkali Flats, 100 miles of shimmering salt and cracked earth. It was about 3 a.m., the kind of deep inky black where your headlights feel like they're being swallowed. I was sipping stale coffee, listening to a late-night talk show about alien abductions, of all things. That's when I saw it. At first I thought it was a deer, but it was too tall, too thin. It stepped out from the side of the road into the beam of my headlights, and I slammed on the brakes, the whole rig groaning and shuddering. It stood perfectly still in the middle of the road. It had to be at least 8 feet tall, but it was impossibly skinny, like a stick figure drawn by a child. Its limbs were too long, its joints bent at weird, unnatural angles. Its skin was the color of pale clay, stretched tight over its bones. But the worst part was its movement. It turned its head to look at me, not smoothly, but in a series of jerky, clicking motions like a stop-motion animation. It had no face. No eyes, no nose, just a smooth, blank expanse of skin. It took a step towards my truck, its long, spindly leg moving with that same horrifying, stuttering motion. I didn't think. I just reacted. I threw the truck in gear and swerved around it, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. As I passed it, I glanced in my side mirror. It was standing there, watching me go, its head tilted at an impossible angle. I drove for another 50 miles before my hands stopped shaking enough to grip the steering wheel properly. I told another trucker about it at a stop a few hours later. He just nodded slowly, his eyes wide. He told me I was lucky. Some folks who see the alkali walker out there, they don't get to drive away. My daughter, Chloe, was 5 when she started talking to the Whispering Man. He lived in her closet, apparently. I assumed it was an imaginary friend, a normal phase. I'd play along. What did the Whispering Man say today, sweetie? I'd ask. Usually it was mundane kid stuff. He said my blue dress is pretty, or he likes it when I draw rainbows. I wasn't worried. Until the day she told me the Whispering Man is sad. He said Grandma's flower is wilting. My mother, who lived 3 states away, was a passionate gardener. Her prize-winning roses were her pride and joy. I called her that evening just to chat. After a few minutes, she let out a heavy sigh. You know, it's the strangest thing, she said. My beautiful prize rose bush, the one that won the state fair, it's completely withered. The nursery can't figure it out. It just died overnight. A chill went down my spine. I chalked it up to a very, very weird coincidence. A week later, Chloe came to me with tears in her eyes. The Whispering Man is scared, she said. He says Uncle Robert's car is sleepy and wants to go off the road. My brother, Robert, was a salesman who spent most of his life on the highway. I immediately called him, my voice trembling. Rob, this is going to sound insane, but please just pull over. Get your car checked now. He laughed at me, told me I was being ridiculous, that he had a big meeting to get to. He promised he'd get it checked out over the weekend. He never made it. The police said it looked like he'd fallen asleep at the wheel. His car drifted across 3 lanes of traffic and hit a bridge abutment. The search and rescue teams found me delirious and dehydrated a week later. They searched for him for months. They never found a trace. I've told the authorities, the rangers, everyone about the staircase. They think I'm crazy, that I'm covering for something that happened to my brother. But I know what I saw. The stairs are still out there somewhere in those woods. And whatever is at the top of them, it has my brother. This happened just last year. It's so mundane it's almost stupid, but it messes with my head more than any ghost story ever could. I was at home getting ready to go out. My phone was on the kitchen counter, plugged in and charging. I was in my bedroom getting dressed when I heard my text alert go off. It has a very specific sound. I finished up and went into the kitchen to check it. There was a message from my friend Sarah. It was just a string of nonsense letters and symbols like a pocket text. Kinchakme, that sort of thing. I figured she'd just mashed her screen by accident. I replied, "Pocket text?" and thought nothing of it. A few minutes later, she replied, "What are you?" After the funeral, I went into Chloe's room. She was sitting on her bed, her back to the closet. I sat down next to her. "Chloe," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "is the Whispering Man here?" She nodded, not looking at me. "He's crying," she said. "He says he tried to tell them." I went to her closet and threw the door open, my heart pounding. It was empty except for her clothes and toys. I never asked about the Whispering Man again, and she never mentioned him. But I know he was real. And whatever he wasn't imaginary. My friends and I used to be into urban exploration. We'd find abandoned buildings and just explore. It was a stupid, dangerous hobby, but we were 19 and felt invincible. Our best find was an old defunct slaughterhouse on the outskirts of town. A massive, crumbling brick building that stank of rust and decay even after 50 years of being empty. We went in one afternoon, armed with flashlights and cheap digital cameras. The place was creepy as hell. Huge, echoing rooms with meat hooks still dangling from the ceilings. Dark stains on the concrete floors that we tried not to think about too much. We made our way to the main processing floor, a cavernous space with a high ceiling. It was dead silent, the only sound our own footsteps and nervous laughter. Then we heard it. A low rhythmic hum. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. We froze, flashlights darting around the empty room. The hum grew louder, resonating in our chests. It was joined by a metallic clang, then another. Clang, clang, clang. It sounded like machinery, like a factory line starting up. The air grew thick and heavy, and we could smell something new under the decay. The coppery, sickeningly sweet smell of fresh blood. We were all completely sober, but the sounds were undeniable. We could hear the squeal of conveyor belts, the hiss of steam, the distant, terrified sound of animals. It was like we had stepped back in time. We bolted. We ran through the dark corridors, the phantom sounds of the slaughterhouse chasing us, the smell of blood thick in our throats. We burst out into the afternoon sun, gasping for air, our hearts pounding. We looked back at the silent, derelict building. The air around it was still. The sounds were gone. We never went back, but I still have the pictures from that day. They're just blurry shots of empty, decaying rooms. But in one of them, if you zoom in on a dark corner, you can just make out a figure. A man in an old-fashioned butcher's apron, his face obscured by shadow, just standing there, watching. I bought an antique locket at a forgotten flea market. It was silver, tarnished with age, with intricate floral engravings. I cleaned it up and started wearing it. That's when the dreams began. They weren't my dreams. They were memories, vivid and detailed, from someone else's life. The first one, I was a young woman with long, dark hair, standing on the deck of a steamship, waving goodbye to a man on the shore. I could feel the ocean spray on my face, feel the heartbreaking sorrow of leaving him behind. I woke up with tears on my cheeks. Another night, I was in a bustling 1920s speakeasy, the air thick with cigarette smoke and illegal gin. I could hear the jazz band, feel the thrill and danger of the place. I was dancing with a handsome man with a charming, crooked smile. Each night brought a new memory, a first kiss under a willow tree, the birth of a child, the grief of losing a parent. It was an entire life playing out in my head while I slept. I started to feel like I knew this woman, this Eliza, whose name I learned from a dream where she was writing a letter. I felt her joys and her sorrows as if they were my own. The last dream was the most terrifying. I was old, lying in a hospital bed. The room was sterile and quiet. I could feel my breath growing shallow, the life draining out of me. The man with the crooked smile, now old and gray, was holding my hand, his face etched with grief. I felt a final, peaceful sigh escape my lips, and then darkness. I woke up gasping, clutching the locket at my throat. It felt ice cold against my skin. I took it off and put it in a box. The dream stopped. I still have it, sitting on my dresser. Sometimes I think about putting it on again, just to feel Eliza's world one more time. But I'm too afraid. I lived her life. I don't want to have to live her death again. I was an EMT for a few years in a small rural town in the Appalachians. Mostly it was car accidents and heart attacks. Standard stuff. But there was one call I'll never forget. We got dispatched to a man down at an old farmhouse way out on a dirt road. It was the middle of the night, foggy, the whole 9 yards. We pulled up to this dark, dilapidated house that looked like it hadn't been lived in for decades. The dispatcher confirmed the address. My partner and I exchanged a look, but we grabbed our gear and went in. The front door was ajar. "Paramedics!" I called out, my voice sounding small in the oppressive silence. No answer. We stepped inside. The air was frigid and smelled of dust and damp earth. We swept our flashlights through the first room. It was completely empty, except for a single wooden chair in the center. Then we heard it. A soft, weak voice from upstairs. "In here," it whispered. We went up a rickety staircase to the second floor. One door was slightly open. We pushed it open and found him. An old man, impossibly thin and pale, was lying on a bare mattress on the floor. He was gone. No pulse, no respiration. He'd clearly been dead for hours, maybe even a day. We did the official checks, confirmed it, and I radioed it in. As my partner was filling out the paperwork, I stood in the doorway, looking back at the old man. I felt a profound sadness for him, dying all alone in this forgotten house. Just as I was about to turn away, I heard it again, clear as day, right next to my ear. A soft, airy whisper that said, "Thank you." I jumped so hard I nearly fell down the stairs. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The room was empty, just me, my partner in the hall, and the dead man on the floor. My partner asked what was wrong. I told him I thought I heard a rat. I didn't want him to think I was crazy, but I know what I heard. It wasn't a rat. It was a ghost, a grateful one, finally free from his lonely prison. After my divorce, I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment. It was the first time I had ever lived completely alone, and it was a little unsettling at first. Every creak and groan of the old building made me jump. To make myself feel better, I started talking to my mom on the phone a lot. She lived halfway across the country, but hearing her voice was a comfort. That's when the weird stuff started. I'd be in the kitchen making dinner, and I'd hear it, clear as a bell, coming from the living room. "Honey, can you come here for a second?" It was my mother's voice. The first few times, my heart would leap with a strange sort of hope before I remembered she was 1,000 miles away. I'd call her, and she'd be fine at home, watching TV, completely unaware. I tried to dismiss it as my mind playing tricks on me, my loneliness manifesting in a weird way. But it kept happening. Then the tone changed. One day I was folding laundry, and I heard her voice from the bedroom, but this time it was sharp, mocking. "Still can't even fold a shirt right, can you?" It was so jarring, so unlike her. I felt a prickle of fear. It escalated from there. I'd hear her voice whispering insults from the other room. "Pathetic," it would hiss. "No wonder he left you." One night, I was trying to sleep, and I heard it right next to my bed, a low, guttural laugh that sounded like my mother's voice being dragged through gravel. I snapped. I sat bolt upright and screamed into the darkness, "Leave me alone!" The laughing stopped. The apartment fell silent. It's been 2 years, and I haven't heard the voice since. I still don't know what it was. A mimic? Some kind of entity that fed off my loneliness and then my fear? All I know is that living alone doesn't scare me anymore, because whatever was in that apartment with me was far more terrifying than any silence. The story of the stairs in the woods is one you hear in whispers around campfires, a bit of folklore that sounds too ridiculous to be true, until you see it. My brother and I were deep woods camping in a national forest in the Pacific Northwest, miles from any marked trail. We were experienced hikers looking for a real challenge. On our third day, we broke through a thicket of ferns into a small, perfectly circular clearing. And there it was, a staircase. It was made of what looked like white marble, incongruously clean against the forest floor. It was a grand, sweeping set of stairs, the kind you'd see in an old mansion, complete with an ornate balustrade. It went up about 40 feet and just ended. It led to absolutely nowhere, just empty air and the canopy of trees above. We stood there for a long time just staring. It made no sense. There were no ruins, no foundations, no sign that a building had ever stood here. The stairs were just there, perfect and pristine. My brother, always the braver one, said, "I'm going up." I told him it was a bad idea. The whole scene felt wrong, sacred and profane at the same time. He just laughed and started climbing. I watched him, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. He got to the top, to the platform that led to nothing. He turned around and grinned, giving me a thumbs up. "See? Nothing to be afraid of," he yelled, and then he vanished. Not fell, not jumped. 1 second he was there, grinning, and the next, the top of the staircase was empty. The air where he had been seemed to shimmer for a moment, and then it was still. I screamed his name until my throat was raw. I searched the area for hours, then days. Talking about? I was confused. I screenshotted our conversation and sent it to her. "This," I wrote. Her reply made me drop my phone. "That's not me." My phone has been off in my purse for the last hour. I just turned it on because you called. I checked my call log. I hadn't called her. I stared at the nonsense text on my screen. Suddenly, the random letters didn't look so random anymore. I started looking for patterns. I don't know why, it was just a compulsion. And then I saw it. Buried in the gibberish, if you ignored every other letter, were 3 words. "Behind your door." I was standing in my kitchen, my back to the hallway that led to my front door. The apartment was completely silent. I didn't move for what felt like an eternity. I didn't turn around. I just walked backwards into my bedroom, locked the door, and called the police. They found nothing. No signs of a break-in, no one there. But I know what that message said, and I know it didn't come from my friend. Something was in my apartment that day. Something that knew how to use my phone to play a very, very sick game. Have you ever seen something that your brain simply refuses to process? Something so out of place, so fundamentally wrong that you're left questioning your own sanity? It happened to me on a family road trip through Arizona. We were driving on a long, empty stretch of highway at dusk. My dad was driving. Mom was asleep in the passenger seat, and I was in the back, staring out the window at the endless desert landscape. That's when I saw the man on the bicycle. He was wearing a full, old-fashioned 3-piece wool suit. Tweed jacket, vest, trousers, the works. He also had on a bowler hat. He was riding a vintage penny-farthing bicycle, you know, the kind with the giant front wheel and the tiny back one. He was pedaling leisurely along the shoulder of this deserted highway, miles from any town in the 100-degree heat. He didn't seem to be sweating. He just pedaled along with a serene, blank expression on his face. My dad saw him too. "What in the world?" he muttered, slowing the car down as we approached. As we got closer, it got weirder. The man and his bicycle? They were slightly transparent. We could see the desert landscape right through them, like a faded photograph. As we drove past, he turned his head and looked directly at us. He didn't have any eyes, just smooth, empty sockets. He smiled, a wide, unnatural grin, and tipped his bowler hat. We both screamed. My dad floored it, and we didn't stop driving for 2 hours. We tried to talk about it later, to rationalize it. A mirage? A hallucination brought on by the heat? But we both saw the exact same thing. The suit, the hat, the penny farthing, and the terrifying eyeless smile. There are things out there in the desert, things that don't belong to our time or our world, and sometimes they just want to go for a bicycle ride. My grandmother has lived in the same house for 60 years. It's a house full of memories, but it has one rule: you never, ever go into the attic. When I was a kid, I asked her why. She just looked at me with her serious, tired eyes and said, "Because that's where the other family lives, and they don't like visitors." I thought she was just trying to scare me. Last year, she had a fall and had to stay with us for a few weeks while she recovered. I had to go to her house to pick up some of her things. It was the first time I'd ever been in that house alone. I got her clothes and medicine, and as I was about to leave, I stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at the hallway where the pull-down cord for the attic was. Curiosity got the better of me. This is so stupid, I muttered to myself, but I pulled down the creaking attic stairs anyway. I poked my head up into the darkness. It was just a normal attic, full of old furniture covered in white sheets, boxes of forgotten belongings, and the smell of dust and time. I was about to go back down feeling foolish when I saw it. In the far corner, there was a small, child-sized rocking chair, and it was moving, gently rocking back and forth all by itself. A chill crawled up my spine. Then I heard a sound. A little girl humming a nursery rhyme. It was coming from the corner with the chair. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The humming stopped. A tiny, high-pitched voice whispered out of the darkness. "Are you a visitor?" it asked. I didn't answer. I slammed the attic stairs shut so hard the whole house shook. I ran out of there and didn't look back. When my grandma was better, I asked her about it. I told her what I'd heard. She just nodded slowly. "That's Mary," she said, her voice soft. "She's been there since we moved in. She just wants to play. My grandmother has lived in that house for 60 years, sharing it with the ghost of a little girl, and she never thought to mention it in any more detail. Some things, she believes, are better left undisturbed." I work the night shift as a security guard at a large, empty office building. It's usually dead quiet, just me and the hum of the servers. One night, I was doing my rounds on the 4th floor. It's the accounting department, a sea of identical gray cubicles under the dim glow of the emergency lights. As I walked down one of the aisles, I heard a sound, a single, distinct tap, like a fingernail tapping on a keyboard. I stopped and listened. Silence. I told myself it was just the building settling. I kept walking. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from one of the cubicles up ahead. I unclipped my heavy flashlight from my belt and approached slowly, my heart starting to beat a little faster. "Hello?" I called out. "Security, is anyone there?" No reply. Just more tapping, faster now. Tap, 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 tap. I rounded the corner of the cubicle, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The chair was empty. The computer was off. There was no one there. But as the beam of my light hit the desk, the tapping stopped. And on the dark computer screen, a single word was slowly, painstakingly being typed out, letter by letter, by an invisible finger. R-U-N. I didn't need to be told twice. I sprinted out of there, down the stairs, and didn't stop until I was in the lobby. I watched the security monitors for the rest of the night, my eyes glued to the camera for the 4th floor. The office remained still and empty. But just before dawn, I saw something. The camera glitched for a second, just a flicker of static. And when the picture came back, every single office chair on that floor had been turned to face the camera, as if they were all waiting for me. I put in my 2 weeks' notice the next day, so do you believe them? Do these stories sound like the ramblings of tired minds and overactive imaginations? Or do they resonate with something deep inside you, that small, quiet part of you that has felt the impossible and has been too afraid to speak its name? The truth is, the world is far stranger than we are taught to believe. These moments, these glitches, these encounters are happening all the time, all around us. Most people are just too busy, too distracted, or too scared to notice. But now you know, so keep your eyes open. Listen to the silence between the noise. And when you feel that chill run down your spine for no reason at all, don't just dismiss it. You might not be alone. If you've ever experienced something you can't explain, something that made you question everything you thought you knew, I want to hear about it. Share your story in the comments below. Let's talk about the things that hide in the shadows. And if you want to hear more tales from the edge of reality, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because believe me, there are always more stories waiting to be told. Stay safe out there, and try to get some sleep.